we wanted to talk about free software and open source because this has been a problem for about 10 years. And open source and free software, in my opinion, are two ways of talking about the same thing. One of them emphasizes your freedom, and it plays really well to technical people, to philosophers, maybe to some kinds of politicians. Open source plays really well to business people who haven't bought in to the philosophy yet. And what I think is important about open source is it lets people get into this. And then once they understand the benefits, they start to realize, hey, that Stallman guy is right.
As I understand it, the conceptualization with the initial open source idea was using the term in a way as a marketing method to present the ideas or some parts of the ideas to management. And certainly in terms of numbers, it's been incredibly successful. The market penetration of that term is phenomenal. The perspective from an organization like FSFE is that we want freedom to be the top thing we talk about because we think that having the freedoms to use, study, share, and improve are imperative to making the most from software. The concern I have sometimes about a term like open source is based around ensuring that people understand the scope of freedom granted. In Europe, it's been fascinating because I would suggest that the term free software is more automatically compatible with our political systems and our business systems here, especially when you talk about social benefit, because a lot of us are social democracies with a very strong governmental mandate to benefit all citizens. But on the business sphere, on the pure economic sphere, again, it was the term open source that had deep market penetration.
So I think it really is a difference in marketing. So what we're really talking about is tailoring the message to the audience. Now, there's something that open source got wrong about tailoring the message, and that is early in the days of open source, one of the important, at that time, players felt that Richard Stallman personally would scare business people. You know, he had long hair, he had a beard, he had weird ideas. And so it was felt that Richard, we just didn't want to ever present him. And because of that, and I never agreed with this, and this hurt me actually quite a lot, but it was felt by some people that Richard should be deprecated, should be hidden from the business people, and that open source would surmount and replace the free software campaign. That was a mistake, and the most important thing about that is it's over. Okay, so we are talking about the same thing when we say open source and free software.
So I guess the important questions we have now in the future are how do we make sure that the grants maintain, that the licenses work, that we're able to manage this in a sustainable way for the future, and not to regard personality conflicts as a driving force in how we'll determine our strategic future as a movement. I'm curious to see what happens with the next generation of kids coming up. Maybe they've only got awareness that it's, they think, oh, it's called Linux. Whatever.
And IBM made it.
Right, IBM made it, and it's Linux. Whatever they're saying. I hope that we'll have a good framework in place to educate them on why there's something really important here. Use, study, share, improve, have copyleft. There's reasons. And that we're going to be able to pass the knowledge and experience, not repeat conflicts, not repeat misunderstandings or personalities, and to take all the great stuff like market penetration that happened from 98, take the cool stuff like the Foundation in Philosophy and Society from the Free Software Foundation, and to pass that on to the next generations.
What I am trying to do to fix them is not just be an open source evangelist, but to enter more seriously general purpose politics, because you're a technical guy, you understand this philosophy, you understand what's at stake, where we have a really important mission in supporting democracy, in having an infrastructure that is fair, that no one owns, that will be the path that you get news. And of course the way you get news is how you vote. Who understands this in Parliament? Who understands this in Congress? Why are there so few technical people in there?
That's a good point. That's a good point. I agree that we're in an unfortunate situation where techies are still remote from everyday society, and in politics there isn't a good set of technical experts that talk to high-level politicians. We're going to have to keep people understanding that it's not just cherry-picking the bits of free software you like. The ecosystem, the entire grouping, depends on the whole. And Creative Commons is not a license, and it's not a grant, it's a family. And I think unless we can increase people's education about legal approaches, there's potential for confusion. And I get worried that people can get confused, and there are ramifications to that. Like someone put up pictures and then Virgin in the US, Virgin Mobile, used them in an advertising campaign. And this person was saying, well, Virgin's making money out of my pictures. What's going on? I never intended that. And Virgin was perfectly within their rights according to the license the person chose. Licensing is hard. We need good guidelines. In free software, we have fantastic outline documents. In documentation, in things like Creative Commons, I think we still need work to help people understand the scopes of grants, and maybe we need to reduce the complexity.
Well, I think we do have some guidelines problem, because going back to software, I get people who write me and say, well, I'm really disgruntled because people used my software in their product. They didn't give anything back. They don't distribute source code. And I said, okay, well, what license are you using? BSD. Well, yeah, you gave them the right to do that.
And they get a surprise.
And, well, I used BSD because I thought it was more free.
Right.
And, yeah, so there is a lot of not going through what is it that you're giving out and what is it that you expect back. And the other thing that I find with licensing is that people in general perceive licensing from the perspective of the person receiving the license. So BSD is often preferred because if you receive the license, you have the ultimate number of rights, almost every right except the right to remove an attribution from somewhere that no one will ever look anyway. And in the other hand, GPL, from the perspective of someone who is giving out the software, is often much better because it allows that person to have software that is set up to grow. And my GPL software has become 5 times the size of what I wrote because of that, and all of it was done by companies and put back in the public. So for business, especially for a business that might, for example, want to use dual licensing, GPL is a really great business tool. And people don't realize it because they only think about receiving the license, and they don't think about, well, what does this license do to the person who wrote the work and is giving it out?
People look at free software and they think that's a great idea to cut licensing costs. And they completely miss the scope of the value proposition. It's a big issue that people don't think about it as much, but it's changing. In my experience, I think in Europe at least, more people are beginning to think, well, actually, the GPL, it actually means that we all work together instead of having kind of bring to market, lose it, bring to market, lose it. It's a better value proposition. And people are realizing that here, though there are also irrational concerns that don't fit into the licenses, but people sometimes apply concerns suggesting that they will lose control of their products, that they will have security problems, that they will have liability problems with terms like trade secrets and patents. And people sometimes bring fears to the free software area that don't really belong there. At least in my experience in Europe, sometimes people are worried for reasons that are not relevant to what they're doing in practice.
Very often they don't realize that some of the more restrictive licenses actually solve the problems for them.
Right.
And, a big concern is, well, what is to prevent my competitor from running away with this if I release it? And GPL and even Affero GPL are just excellent tools around that, because they say to your competitor, here's the stuff, be my partner or don't participate.